Your leadership team just took a psychological safety survey. The scores came back green across the board, and that might be the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to you. Here's what actually happened. Your leadership team looked at that survey and did what high-performing professionals are trained to do from the moment they enter the workforce. They read the room. They calculated the risk. They made a decision in less than 3 seconds about what was safe to say. And most of them chose high scores, green. Not because everything is fine, but because saying so felt safer than the alternative. This is what researchers and team coaches call the green light trap, and it's far more common than you think. The green light trap isn't dishonesty, it's adaptation. The green light trap is a decision-making failure where projects, hires, or strategies are approved or greenlit without proper critical analysis, often because of social pressure, bias, or a desire for speed. Now, your people are smart. They've watched what happens when someone raises a concern in the wrong meeting, or challenges a direction the leader is clearly committed to, or admits a mistake before the numbers have a chance to self-correct. They've learned the rules, not the rules you posted on the culture wall, the real rules, the unwritten ones that everyone knows but dares not say out loud. And so they smile, they nod, they click agree on the survey, and they carry their actual thoughts home with them. The question isn't whether your team trusts you. The question is whether they trust the system, the unspoken norms that govern what's expressible in your culture. And right now, if your survey is saying green, go, 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 there's a good chance the system is telling them don't. Now, stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how this trap forms and what it's quietly costing your organization, and 3 shifts that can actually change the conditions underneath it. Not the survey scores, the conditions. And this applies no matter where your team sits in the organization, bottom to top. In fact, C-suite teams are often the least psychologically safe teams in the organization. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard is where most of this conversation starts. Her work across hospitals, engineering firms, and executive teams established that psychological safety, the shared belief that you won't be punished for speaking up, is the single strongest predictor of team learning and performance. Not talent, not strategy, not resources, simply the belief that it's safe to tell the truth. But here's what most leaders miss when they read Edmondson's research. Psychological safety is not a feeling, it's a pattern. It's built or destroyed through thousands of tiny, often invisible moments of response. The micro reaction when someone raises a concern that slows down the meeting. The tone shift when a mistake gets surfaced in public. The eye contact between 2 senior leaders when a junior voice in the room says something unexpected. Your team is reading all of it, and they're making this running calculation. If I say what I actually think right now, what happens to me? The green light trap forms when the honest answer to that question is something I'd rather avoid, and leaders create it, almost always without meaning to. You don't have to be an unsafe leader to create an unsafe system. You just have to be a human being. Busy, under pressure, subtly rewarding the people who move quickly and quietly over those who slow things down and have hard questions. Most leadership teams have at least one person, usually several, who have learned with precision how to read the weather in the room and to respond to the climate rather than the forecast. They look engaged. They're actually managed. Which brings me to the part that almost no one is talking about. The way most organizations measure psychological safety is exactly the thing that makes the green light trap invisible. Most psychological safety assessments, including the widely used 7-item scale derived from Edmondson's research, ask team members to rate agreement with statements. Things like, it's safe to take risks on this team, or members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues, or no one on this team would act in a way that undermines my efforts. Now, on papers, those are excellent questions. And if your team is performing well enough that they're willing to answer them honestly, they're genuinely useful. But here's the flaw. The same social pressures that suppress psychological safety in your meetings also suppress psychological safety on those surveys. If your team doesn't feel safe enough to challenge the direction in Monday's leadership call, they don't suddenly feel safe enough to click strongly disagree on a form or strongly agree on a form that their manager might see. The instrument and the phenomenon are contaminated by the same variable. You're using a yardstick made of the very thing you're trying to measure. The survey shows green because the culture enforces green. This is not a failure of the research. Edmondson's work is foundational. The failure is in how leaders have operationalized it, reaching for a number when what they need is a diagnosis. A high score on a psychological safety survey tells you one of two things. Either your team genuinely has high psychological safety, which is possible and worth celebrating, or your team has high social intelligence and a strong awareness of what your organization rewards. Telling those two things apart is the entire challenge. So what does actually work? Not as a survey, as a leadership practice. Here are 3 shifts grounded in the research and what real team coaching work shows actually changes the underlying conditions. Shift 1, measure behavior, not belief. The question is not, do people believe it's safe to speak up? The question is, are they actually speaking up? And what happens when they do? This is a behavioral audit, not a survey, and it requires you to look at patterns over time. For example, in your last 5 leadership team meetings, who spoke? Who was silent? When a concern was raised, what happened in the 30 seconds immediately after? Was the conversation open or closed? Did the person who raised the concern get curious, follow up with questions? Or was there a polite redirect back to the agenda? In the team coaching I do based on David Clutterbuck's Peril model, I don't ask, do you feel heard? Instead, I look for how the team ensures that everyone's voice is heard in meetings. And if I can't tell, it can become a coaching conversation with the team. I look for how the team handles mistakes and inquire about it if the typical response is undermining safety. And I look for when and how feedback is given on the team, especially tough feedback. The difference is subtle but decisive. Behavioral indicators are harder to perform. You can click agree on a survey in 2 seconds. Showing up in a meeting and saying, I think we're making a mistake here, can cost you something. Watch for the behavioral patterns that indicate real safety. Do people finish each other's ideas or protect their own? Does conflict happen in the open or does it migrate to the hallway? Are mistakes named and addressed quickly or allowed to compound quietly? These are your real data points. Shift 2, model the cost of certainty. The green light trap is at its core a certainty problem. Leaders signal, often without knowing it, that they have already decided. The meeting is merely a formality. The direction is set. The question is implementation of their idea, not exploration of other perspectives. When that signal is in the room, your smartest people adapt. They stop bringing you the questions that would slow everything down. They carry it out of the room with them and process it somewhere else. in the parking lot, over Slack, in their own heads at 11 o'clock at night. And you lose the thing that makes great teams great, the generative friction of genuinely different perspectives meeting a genuinely open question. Peter Hawkins, whose 5 disciplines model underpins systemic team coaching, describes one of the core disciplines as co-creating, not exchanging pre-cooked thoughts in a meeting, but generating new thinking that none of you had before you walked in the room. That's only possible when the leader's certainty does not foreclose the space before it opens. The shift is this: get explicit about what you don't know, not performatively, not with a manufactured, "What do you all think?" that everyone recognizes as rhetorical. Genuinely, name the decision you're uncertain about. Name the assumptions you're sitting on that you haven't been able to test. Name the thing that's keeping you up at night. When you model this kind of intellectual vulnerability, you don't lose authority. You create permission, and that permission is the oxygen that psychological safety needs to become real. Shift 3, design the moment before the moment. The hardest part about the green light trap is that it operates in fractions of seconds. By the time someone has decided not to speak, the moment has already passed. Which means you can't intervene during the conversation. You have to design the conditions before it happens. This is what the best team coaches work on with teams and team leaders. Not the content of the team conversations, but the architecture, the norms, the rituals that create a different kind of space before anyone says a word. Here are a few practices that research consistently supports. The first, normalize the question, not just the answer. Build a standing item in your leadership meetings where the only acceptable contribution is a concern, a risk, an unresolved tension, not a solution, not a plan. Just the thing that's sitting at the edge of the conversation that hasn't been named yet. You'll be surprised at what surfaces. The second, debrief failure with the same rigor you debrief success. Most organizations run retrospectives on what went right. The teams with the highest learning cultures, the ones that consistently outperform, treat mistakes as the most valuable data they have. When a leader closes a missed quarter, not with "here's the explanation," but with "here's what we don't yet know or don't yet understand," they change the norms around errors. The third, give safety a specific object. Psychological safety is abstract. Saying you can speak up is easy to say and nearly impossible to test. Instead, name the specific topic your team isn't talking about. Say something like, "We haven't talked about the impact of this reorg on the people who stayed." Or, "We haven't talked about whether this product timeline is actually achievable." Specificity makes it real. General invitations to speak honestly don't work. Targeted ones do. Here's what I want you to sit with. Psychological safety is not a culture initiative. It's not a survey cadence, and it's not a value on your company website. It's a live, dynamic property of your team. It is rebuilt or eroded in every single interaction you have with the people around you. The green light trap forms because talented, perceptive people have learned to manage upward rather than to contribute upward. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a team that performs and a team that merely reports. The most important question you can ask right now is not, "Is my team psychologically safe?" It's, "What would I learn if they were?" Think about that for a moment. What decisions would look different? What risks would surface sooner? What talent would stop walking out the door carrying problems they didn't feel safe naming? The leaders who crack this, and they're not rare, they're just intentional, They don't have safer teams because they asked for honesty. They have safer teams because they built the conditions where honesty was the easier path. That is a leadership skill. It is learnable and it compounds. Start with what you can actually see. Behavior, not belief. Patterns, not surveys. Architecture, not aspiration. Your team is telling you something right now. The question is whether you've built a place where they can say it out loud.